Funds for municipalities and panchayats in Kerala, 1905 in crore. Kerala Finance Minister K. N. Balgopal said that this amount is the third installment of the development fund. He stated that Gram Panchayats will receive 1000 crore, while the district and block panchayats will get 40 to 45 crores. Civilians killed in 3 days Sudan paramilitary assault 200. Emergency lawyers group which documents rights is monitoring Sudan war, said paramilitary rapid support forces attacked unarmed civilians in the villages of Al Qadaris and Al Khelwat, loan given to British water supplier Thames Water. Suspected Suspects detained in Turkey's operations against insurgents 282 and possible drop in Kazakh oil volume due to Ukraine attack. What is the rarest of the rare doctrine? What was the sentence meted out to the accused in the Arjikar medical case and the Sharon medical murder case? How were they different from each other? Is the death penalty constitutionally valid? And in what circumstances can the death sentence be given and the judicial discretion plays a part in it? On January 22, two separate murder convictions resulted in sharply contrasting verdicts, highlighting how Indian courts apply the death penalty. While one case led to capital punishment, the other saw accused sentenced to life imprisonment, reigniting questions about judiciary's approach to the rarest of the rare doctrine, which till now does not have a statutory definition. On August 9, 2024, second-year female postgraduate trainee doctor who was on duty was raped and murdered inside a seminar room at Kolkata's R.G. Kar Medical College and Hospital. Sanjay Roy, a civic volunteer, was arrested and convicted on January 20 based on forensic evidence linking him to the crime. During sentencing, the additional districts and sessions judge said this doesn't fall into the category of rarest of the rare crimes, and Roy was sentenced to life imprisonment with a fine. In contrast, Sharon murder case it did invite the death penalty. Courts decided Sharon Raj, 23-year-old student from Kerala, was poisoned on October 14, 22 by his partner Grishma, who was mixed poison in an Ayurvedic concoction that she offered him to drink. 11 days later, Sharon succumbed to multiple organ failures. The Niyati Kara Additional Sessions Court imposed the death penalty and classified it as one of the rarest of rare cases. The debate on the discretion given to judges to award the death sentence dates back to 1972 when the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of death penalty in Jagmohan Singh versus State of UP. The petitioner argued that the death sentence puts an end to all fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 19 and therefore the law with regard to capital sentence is unreasonable and not in the interest of the general public. He also pointed out that judges have no clear guidelines for deciding between the death penalty and life imprisonment, which he believes is a fair delegation of power. Lastly, he argued that lack of clear rules for judges violates Article 14 of the Constitution, which guarantees equality before the law. However, the court disagreed, explaining that the accused is aware of the potential for a death sentence, and during the trial, all relevant facts, including mitigating circumstances, are considered. The court dismissed the appeal and affirmed the death sentence was constitutional under Article 21. At this stage, there was no clear guidelines when the death penalty should be used, which meant judges had wide discretion to decide. In 1980, the Supreme Court in Bachan Singh vs. State of Punjab established the rarest of rare doctrine, marking a turning point. A five-judge bench held the case and held that the death penalty should be used only in exceptional cases. However, it did not embellish what the rarest of rare meant, leading to further confusion. It was finally in the Machi Singh vs. State of Punjab that the Supreme Court provided a framework for the rarest of rare doctrine. The court identified five categories of crimes where the punishment is justified. The criteria are manner of committing the murder, when the murder is committed in an extremely brutal and just dastardly manner so as to arouse extreme indignation within the community, and the motive of the murder when the murder is committed for a motive which reveals total depravity, social abhorrent nature of the crime, that is, when murder occurs of someone belonging to a minority community and is committed not for personal reasons but in circumstances which arouse social wrath, and magnitude of the crime, the personality of the offender, when the victim is child, a helpless woman, a person rendered helpless by old age, infirmity, etc. In 1980, the Supreme Court in Bachan Singh versus State of Punjab established the rarest of the rare doctrine. In 1980, Supreme Court in the Bachan Singh In 1918, the Supreme Court in the Bachan Singh versus State of Punjab established the doctrine rarest of the rare doctrine. Despite the framework set in Machi Singh versus State of Punjab, established marking a turning point, a five-judge bench held that death penalty should be only used in exceptional cases. However, it did not embellish what the rarest of rare meant. It was finally in Machi Singh versus State of Punjab that the Supreme Court provided a framework for the rarest of the rare doctrine. Despite the framework set in Machi Singh versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court in 1983 in Mithu versus State of Punjab struck down Section 303 of the Indian Penal Code, which described mandatory death penalty for anyone who commits murder while serving a life sentence. The court ruled that it was against Article 14 and 21 of the Constitution, and hence all cases regarding murder should be dealt as per Section 302 of the IPC, which says whoever commits murder shall be punished with death or imprisonment for life and shall also be liable to a fine. In 2022, Supreme Court referred to a constitution bench on the question of how to provide a meaningful, real and effective hearing on mitigating circumstances in cases that attract death penalty. When this is a suo motu taken up, the court may set out a uniform approach to giving an opportunity to the accused to present mitigating circumstances in the trial stage before their crime is deemed one which is rarest of rare. The application of the death penalty in India remains complex and controversial. While the Supreme Court has given a certain framework, the unclear, universally agreed upon definition what qualifies as rarest of the rare continues to leave room for judicial discretion. On January 22, two separate murder convictions resulted in sharply contrasting verdicts highlighting how Indian courts applied the death penalty. The debate on the discretion given to judges to award death sentences backs to 1972 when Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of death penalty in Jagmohan Singh versus State of UP. Jagmohan Singh versus State of UP. In 1980, Supreme Court in the Bachan Singh versus State of Punjab established the rarest of rare doctrine. A five-judge bench heard the case and held that death penalty should be used only in exceptional cases. However, it did not embellish what the rarest of rare meant, leading to further confusion. Why are the marriages in China on a decline? Did the one party, one child policy play a role in current population demography of China? How has the Communist Party of China and Xi Jinping tried to solve the crisis? There has been a major decline in the number of couples who are registering to marry in China. As per the Chinese Ministry of Civil Affairs, across China, only 6.1 million couples registered, a 20% drop as compared to 23 figures. This is the lowest registration since 1986, as the general cost of living and urban employment has risen, with almost 44% of urban women not wanting to marry. Marriages in China are declining. While standalone, this may not appear as a very pertinent challenge. Coupled with consistent decline in population, it gets compounded. China's population has been declining consistently for the last 3 years, and in 2022, the number of deaths exceeded birth rates. The primary reason for this is the one child policy, introduced in 1980s and implemented with great zeal. Chinese President Xi Jinping has tried to reverse the trend by introducing two-child policy in 2016, which was later modified to a three-child policy in 2021. However, the policy shift has failed to have any major impact. Furthermore, the desire for a male child has led to an unbalanced sex ratio as well. The declining population has now become a demographic challenge for Mr. Xi. As a result of these policies, China has witnessed a steady decline in the number of working age people. 19 to 59 people above 60 make up 22% of the Chinese population today, and maybe 50% by 2050. This has intensified the pension pressure, as the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences predicts that pension fund may run out by 2035. In order to postpone such reality, government has increased the retirement age from 60 to 63 for men and 55 for women. This would be a temporary solution, because if the gap continues to rise, it will provide only a limited respite. The failing birth rates have also increased the demand for caregiving and healthcare, while a lot of kindergartens have been shutting out. The reducing population and challenges which this leads to directly impacts the economic future and stability of the Chinese government. Even though the government has been attempting to lure people with a financial support, the cost of raising a child is proving an insurmountable deterrent to the people, rather than accepting the reality of the situation and its far reaching impact. The Xi government is still attempting to resolve this with policies and diktats. Such an approach showcases the government is still looking for ways to change ground realities with the help of top down processes, without acknowledging that these issues need to be accepted as social reality and thus need people-centric solutions which echo with Chinese society today. For example, while delivering a speech at the Women's Federation of China, Mr. Xi called on the women to actively cultivate a new culture of marriage and childbearing and strengthen guidance on young people's view on marriage, childbirth, and family. The statement underscores the gap between CPC and society in China today. The CPC has long history of interfering in the lives of Chinese women, with most prominent example being the one-child policy. The CPC under Mr. Xi is still looking at ways to control and command society. It strongly believes that people should undertake tasks which are commanded by the party, with premise that it knows what is best for the nation. These policies seem to be directed towards safeguarding the power of the party and not to the needs of the larger society. Only 6.1 million couples registered, a drop of 20%. While standalone, this may appear as a very pertinent challenge. Coupled with consistent decline in population, it gets compounded. China has witnessed a steady decline in the number of working age people. People above 60 years make up 22% of the population and maybe 50% by 2050. How pragmatism is inadequate to understand Ambedkar's scholarship. Pragmatism is a progressive philosophy, and therefore thinkers become important figures in global pursuit pragmatic philosophical tradition. However, it is inadequate to annihilate caste in a Brahmanical society. Pragmatism is a progressive philosophy, and therefore thinkers like Ambedkar become important figures in the global pluralist, pragmatic philosophical tradition. However, it is inadequate to annihilate caste in a Brahmanical society. After several decades, the scholarship of B.R. Ambedkar is getting global attention. In the last 4 years, four biographies by different scholars and four scholarly books, excluding 5 volumes on Dr. Ambedkar's life and philosophy, has been written. Still, scholars from different disciplines or through interdisciplinary approaches are reluctant to teach or research Ambedkar's thoughts. In this context, it is interesting to see the scholarship of Scott R. Stroud explore the intellectual relationship between John Dewey and B. R. Ambedkar. In his last book, Evolution of Pragmatism in India, Ambedkar, Dewey, and Rhetoric of Reconstruction demonstrated the scholarship of Ambedkar and Dewey within the pragmatist thought. Initially, Stroud, a Devian scholar, explored the Devian influence on Ambedkar's political philosophy to develop the theory of Ambedkar's Navayana Pragmatism. His latest article appeared in the Economic and Political Weekly titled B.R. Ambedkar and the Evolution of Pragmatism in India responded to some of its critiques. Stroud's scholarship attempts to interpret Ambedkar's political philosophy in the global pragmatist tradition. Pragmatism is a progressive philosophy, and therefore thinkers like Ambedkar become important figures in the global pluralist pragmatist philosophical tradition. Stroud argues, however, the range of scholarship on Ambedkar over the years demonstrates that he goes beyond pragmatism. The pragmatist Deviant interpretation articulates only one aspect of Ambedkar's thought. Stroud provides only a deviant reading of Ambedkar, making a deviant interpretation of Ambedkar's multifaceted activities and intellectual engagement only gives us partial understanding of him and reduces Ambedkar's versatile radical philosophy. In his recent book, Ambedkar's Political Philosophy, A Grammar of Public Life from Social Margin, Valerian Rodriguez explicates the wide-ranging nature of Ambedkar's scholarship of political philosophy. For example, one of the claims of Stroud developed is that Ambedkar passionately learned from Dewey's teaching, which remained with Ambedkar for most of his life, for a long time, whether it was French Revolution or a lecture on psychology. Further, Stroud created a speculative story and through a book written by Nima Blum, assuming it was Ambedkar who would attend each lecture of Dewey and reproduce Dewey's words and language. Stroud argues that Ambedkar's conversion to Buddhism was a pragmatic approach, but Buddhism was a lifelong philosophy that Ambedkar cultivated from his childhood. Giving credit or ego to Dewey is a misrepresentation. For example, Ambedkar's family were part of Kabir Panth, which teaches the importance of ethics and morality. Further, Ambedkar read the Buddha Charita in his early age, which remained his sole inspiration. Ambedkar also wrote a letter to Sharda stating the only person whom I owe all my being is Gautama Buddha. Very importantly, Rodriguez shows us in the recent book a wide-ranging scholarship on the epistemic location of Ambedkar that includes Kabir's legacy, Dewey's influence, fullest presence in Ambedkar's social and political discourse of Bombay and India, Fabian socialism, social democracy, and so on. In Columbia Alumni newspaper, where Ambedkar expressed admiration for his great professors John Dewey, James Shotwell, etc., Stroud only picks Dewey for his project of pragmatism. Similarly, one should also explore Ambedkar's time in London, LSE. However, how can Ambedkar's Western education only focus on Dewey? The annihilation of caste was a lifelong project for Ambedkar's emancipatory politics and philosophy. The annihilation of caste, the declaration of renouncing Hinduism, and the conversion to Buddhism were revolutionary acts not merely accorded to pragmatism. They were the part of his praxis because Ambedkar could see the limitations of the modern state and constitutional democracy. He found Buddhism to be an ultimate path. Its 22 vows discard the authority of Hindu gods and goddesses. It is not reformist act either. Not even restructuring the Hindu society. Too much reading of pragmatism into Ambedkar suggests an American project, the same American project yet to adequately address the structural and perpetual racial discrimination faced by the people of the color. Ambedkar was equally aware of the limitations of pragmatism and modern state, and hence caste annihilation was his project of emancipation. Chhatrapati Shivaji was born on February 19, 1630. Here is a quiz. To which clan did Shivaji belong? before he carved out his own independent kingdom from the Sultanate of Bijapur that formed the genesis of Maratha Confederacy. The battle took place in November 1659 in Satara, fought between Maratha forces led by Shivaji and Bijapur troops. Under General Afzal Khan, Maratha emerged victorious. What was the battle called? Treaty was signed between Shivaji and Jai Singh in 1665 after the battle fought between the Mughal Empire and the Marathas. As per the treaty, Shivaji agreed to become vassal of the Mughal Empire and to send his son Sambhaji to fight for the Mughals in the Deccan. What is the treaty called? In the mid 19th century, which Marathi social reformer wrote the interpretation of the Shivaji legend, portraying him the hero of the Dalits. His 1869 ballad form story of the Shivaji was met with great hostility by Brahmin dominated media. Shivaji used the weapon in the form of tiger claw during his encounter with Afzal Khan. What it is called? The image shows collapsed Shivaji statue, which was inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Where was the statue? The birth name Gad- Gadadhar Chattopadhyay, 1836. Gadadhar Chattopadhyay, Gadadhar Chattopadhyay. Role of Bhairavi Brahmini. She was a spiritual teacher who imparted tantric knowledge to Ramakrishna Paramhans. Wife Sharda Devi born Shardamani Mukhopadhyay. Ramakrishna started out priest in Dakshineshwar Kali Temple. Dakshineshwar Kali Temple. Ramakrishna mud emblem is said to symbolize the union of four yogas: Karm, Bhakti, Gyan and Yog. 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 Headquarters is in Balur Math. Timing, time and timing. The validity of CEC selection process needs adjudication. Once again, the manner of appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner and the CEC has become controversial with the government going ahead with the process laid down in December 23 law, which is under challenge before the Supreme Court. Last week, the court has deferred the hearing to February 19, while observing that if there was any development in the interregnum, it would meet the consequences of a subsequent decision on the validity of the act. Ignoring a request from the leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi, the panel elevated Gyanesh Kumar as the CEC and inducted Vivek Joshi as the third member following the retirement of the CEC Rajiv Kumar. The question is whether the Act of 2023 goes against the 2022 Constitution Bench verdict that put in place a committee comprising Prime Minister, LLP and CGI to select the persons to helm the Election Commission of India. The Act, however, includes a union minister in the committee instead of CGI. The government argued that court's panel was only an ad hoc measure until Parliament came forward with its own law as required in the Constitution. The petitioners maintain that the thrust of the 22 judgment is that appointment process should be insulated from executive interference so that its functioning will be truly independent. Whether the CGI should be part of the selection committee is debatable, but there is little doubt that the 2-1 majority vested in the executive renders any selection vulnerable to the criticism that those chosen in that manner would not be seen as independent. The BJP led government has been making appointments in the midst of the court hearing. The court has been declining to interfere in time, leading to such appointments becoming a fait accompli. The government has appointed Arun Goyal as an EC in 22 in the middle of the Constitution Bench hearing and two ECs in March 24 in the run-up of the general election to replace another EC who has retired. Few will agree that the public perception of the ECI as a fearless and fiercely independent constitution has been on a decline. If elections are to be seen as merely followers of the winners, it has to adjudicate the question of whether the procedure set out in the law falls short of the level of independence envisaged in the Constitution Bench verdict for the members of the ECI. Central funding for states in education should be delinked from the NEP by withholding Tamil Nadu's central share of Samagra Shiksha's funds for rejecting the NEP 2020. The union government is flexing its muscles to coerce states into submission. This move also undermines the intent of the Samagra Shiksha Scheme 1819, which consolidated the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, and the teacher education programs. The scheme was designed to enable equitable access to quality education for all school children. Since last year, Tamil Nadu has repeatedly flagged non-dispersal of 2,000 crore, warning that the funding shortfall has severely strained at school education infrastructure, affecting nearly 40 lakh students and 32,000 staff members. Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan has explicitly blamed the state for the impasse, declaring that the funds will be released only if Tamil Nadu implements the NEP in letter and spirit. Adding fuel to the fire, he has insisted that the state adopted three-language formula mandating Tamil, English, and regional language in schools. This stance disregards Tamil Nadu's long-standing opposition to trilingual system dating back to 1937 and its firm commitment to a two-language policy of Tamil and English since 1968. Adding fuel to fire, he has insisted that state adopt the three-language formula, mandating Tamil and English and a regional language in schools. This stance disregards Tamil Nadu's long-standing opposition to trilingual system dating back to 1937 and its firm commitment to a two-language policy of Tamil and English since 1968. Going a step further, Mr. Pradhan has accused Tamil Nadu's leadership of being divisive and politically motivated. He even suggested that the state needs to come to terms with the Indian constitution and adhere to the rules of law, implying quite unwarrantedly that the state was not being run with the statute. Unsurprisingly, the response in the Tamil Nadu has been swift and sharp, especially on the language issue, which remains non-negotiable for most political parties in the state. Chief Minister M.K. Stalin has rightly questioned which constitutional provision mandates the three-language policy and warned that such blatant coercion will not be tolerated. While the NEP claims it does not impose Hindi. Successive union governments have until now respected Tamil Nadu's autonomy over its language policy. Policies governing subjects in the concurrent list of the constitution require flexibility and dialogue to ensure successful implementation. Policies under concurrent list Policies under concurrent list of the constitution require flexibility and dialogue to ensure successful implementation across diverse regions. Policies under concurrent list require flexibility and dialogue to ensure successful implementation across diverse regions. A rigid one-size-fits-all approach risks undermining cooperative federalism and fostering resentment across states, which are equal stakeholders in central schemes. A more pragmatic approach would be to delink Samagra Shiksha and Pradhan Mantri schools for Rising India from the NEP and instead funding to generic performance indicators. At the same time, Tamil Nadu would do well to finalize the rollout of its long pending state education policy as a viable alternative to the NEP, ensuring academic continuity and stability for its students. Riding roughshod over the other pillars of democracy has been the practice of the government of the day. As the face-off between executive and the judiciary is well known, the member of appointment of the new Chief Election Commissioner is likely to invite the ire of the top court. The Congress party seems to be barking up the wrong tree. It is inappropriate for the judiciary to be involved in executive appointments, and the sanctity of each pillar of democracy has to be maintained. It would be more appropriate for the Congress to engage with the government in the spirit of collaboration. It was deeply concerning to read that the Central Pollution Control Board, in its report to the NGT, has recorded high levels of fecal coliform microbes from human and animal excreta. Fecal coliform in river water at the Kum. It remains to be seen how the government will respond. Will it take this report seriously or dismiss it, with blind followers condemning the NGT? It is alarming that there is high contamination at Prayagraj. It poses a serious threat to human health. Perhaps devotees need to have a proper health check after they return. Why people are greedy and avaricious to accumulate property, both movable and immovable, when they know that not even smidgen out of their illegal earnings can be carried along with them when they shed their moral coils, is baffling. It is ironic that the former Tamil Nadu Chief Minister Jayalalitha amassed wealth and property when there are number of ancient sayings in Tamil that highlight the need for corruption-free life, leading to contentment. The political class must note that simple living and high thinking adds luster to one's high position in life. The list was shocking: 27 kg of gold jewellery, 1526 acres of land in several districts, bank deposits worth 10 crore, and a golden waist belt, a crown and sword, to name just a few. One only hopes that the proceeds from the sale of confiscated assets are utilized for the benefit of those in the need of rural areas. There needs to be a clear message sent to those in public life from this case. The Russia-Ukraine war has become a focal point of global jostling. The Ukrainian president appears firm in protecting Ukraine's sovereignty. One waits to see whether there will be resolution to all satisfaction of all sides. Why people are greedy and avaricious to accumulate property, both movable and immovable, when they know not even a smidgen of their illegal earnings can be carried along with them when they shed their mortal coils, is baffling. Quakes may well sharpen India's seismic readiness. 2 years ago, February 6, 2023, the people of Turkey and Syria were jolted out of their sleep. At least 17,000 people were killed, with their numbers mounting within minutes as the great earthquake shook these countries in the early hours after 4 a.m. At 7.8 on a scale of 0 to 10. A second jolt came like a collaborator of the first 9 hours later, destroying whatever buildings stood on around the scene of the first trauma. Fault lines is an expression that we come across and use as we make glacier. Fault line is an expression that we come across as a line. Fault line is an expression that we come across as use as we might glaciers or deserts, that without realizing that it refers to an intensely volatile and totally unpredictable phenomena like the temper of the proverbial sleeping dragon or demon. Fault lines lie between the 15 log-jammed major tectonic plates on which the Earth's thin crust sits. These lines can slumber for decades, even centuries, quietly, one may say so sweetly, that the very existence can be forgotten by all except seismologists. Until this fault line stir, rise, shake, and then go on a mutilate, destroy, and kill whatever lies on along those lines. Depending on the degree of the awakened one's temper, the fury lasts and abates till such time as it lasts or abate. India's India's Indian plate pressing onto the Eurasian plate sculpted the Himalaya. The fault line involves right along the Great Himalayan Arc that stretches from Kashmir to northeast. It also implicates adjacent tracts in Pakistan, the Tibetan Autonomous Region of China, Nepal, and Bhutan. We are not but dimly aware of this. For those of us who do not live in those stunningly beautiful tracts, that region means and evokes snow, pure air, clear waters, holidays, and leisure. But we must understand the concurrent scene, which is about potential rubble ravaged hillsides, mutilated river courses, and trauma. We must shake ourselves out of our dangerous illusion, our perilous innocence about the reality beneath our feet. Seismologists tell us that the two great tectonic plates, the Indian and the Eurasian, have now slept their really deep sleep long enough now, and that the built up pressure inside their folds cannot be expected to hold the tension much longer. Sure enough, the little over just 1 month ago on January 7, 2025, at 9:05 a.m., the earthquake measuring 7.1 on Tibet, between 126 and 400 people were reportedly killed, and unmindful of the national borders and oblivious of the lines of actual or national control, the quake made itself felt in Nepal and northern India. On January 10, damage control. If the epicenter had been located closer to India, the damage could have been manifold, and added earthquakes in the Himalaya evoke a special kind of dread in the country. The comment was right. The dread they do cause, but they have occasioned the kind of intense and urgent planning that is needed. Have they occasioned national alertness, resolve, and action? The editorial went on to say, unfortunately, predicting the day and time outside the ambit of current science, thus, best we can hope for is insulation against the projected damage. It is in this context that infrastructure development in the Himalayan region must be viewed. While several of these projects are intended to smooth the movement of people and goods, the recurrent landslides and glacial lake outbursts that wash away dams, hydropower projects, and roads serve as a constant reminder of the inherent fragility of the region. Every form of infrastructure in the region, power plant or dam, must take into account the imminence of major earthquake and the associated cost factored into planning. Editorial said adhering to already existing building codes, not only in the Himalayas but in the surrounding Indo-Gangetic plains, can go a long way in limiting the inevitable damage. If such adherence was good enough as a response 1 month ago, the earthquakes that shook the national capital on February 17 and within 4 hours Siwan in Bihar suggest that adherence to existing codes is not enough, not enough by half. Social media told us that there were people in Delhi who said that they never felt a tremor so big. That was impressionistic, perhaps, but impressions that come from real sensations under one's feet are real in a way that reports and reconstructed scenes are not. One post said, "Today Delhi and Bihar, tomorrow West Bengal." It was salutary and sobering to see a post from Narendra Modi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, barely back from his visit to the United States, reaching out to the people of Delhi, asking them to stay calm and take precautionary steps. The really meaningful precautions are not within means of the people, they must come from the government, from the state. We are now in a contingency that must take into account high financial and physical cost if provided for, and incalculably higher if not provided for. The principle is the same as in any insurance arrangement. The higher the risk, the higher the premiums. We need, just not quickly, not just urgently, but quite immediately, to provide for state expense on first foreclosing and rolling back engineering enterprises that weaken the Earth's crust, especially rocky terrain in Earth's seismic risk zone, the ascending calibration of 2, 3, and 4, second, superimposing on the existing seismic zonation maps, which are really X-ray plates, newly carefully drawn mapped plans for the plate projection, which can include evacuations, demolitions, and rebuilding of highly vulnerable structures, and assessing the seismic status of high follow-on secondary risk structures such as like hydel projects and atomic reactors, Narora in Uttar Pradesh located in Zone 4. Third, setting up seismic building insurance scheme, wherein premiums for insuring against collapse can be offered and encouraged. And fourth, can be doing assessment of the cost of rescue, temporary sheltering, and rehabilitation zone-wise of dislocated populations. Fifth, fast-forwarding collaboration with the countries that are experts in the field of earthquake anticipation through sensors and architectural nostrums. This would involve expenses on hiring consultants. All this sounds grim, but we should tell ourselves that there is the good news that we are, as of this moment, ahead of the big seismic shock that has been anticipated by seismologists. We are capable of planning with some composure even as we recover from the shock of February 17, not in the post shock trauma accompanied by the fiscal crippling, and we have an institutional advantage in the shape of Ministry of Earth Sciences and Disaster Management Authority waiting to be harnessed in any scheme towards seismic resistance. The motto is brief: earthquakes are not to be prevented, they can scarcely be predicted even in our age of AI, but they can be prepared for. Is anyone doing that? The deeper meaning of declining school enrollment. As the world's most populous country, India hopes to reap its demographic dividend due to burgeoning youth population. Demographers and policy planners always knew that this window of opportunity would remain open, but only for a limited time. Declining school enrollment over the past decade marks the beginning of the end of this period. This means that India may become older even before it becoming rich. It is no wonder that the Unified District Information System for Education Plus data, which was released by Ministry of Education on December 30, caused much consternation as it showed 15.5 million drop, 6% in school enrollment since 2018-19. Official sources have attributed the decline in enrollment to improvements in data collection. They explain that seeding Aadhaar numbers with enrollment eliminates multiple enrollments. This may sound plausible because it has long been suspected that some children are enrolled in multiple schools. However, an analysis of a decade-long data on enrollment and its correlation with different independent variables, including changes in the population and age groups relevant to schooling, tell a different story. In fact, it shows a rather a grim picture. The needle points to the beginning of the end of the era of reaping the demographic dividend. It is a matter of concern that the school enrollment has plummeted by 24 million, 9.45% over the past decade, with elementary level enrollment registered a rather pronounced fall of 18%, 18 million, 13.45%. Up to this level, education has been free and compulsory under the Right of Education Act since 2009. In comparison, the secondary level enrollment declined by 1.43 million, where senior secondary level enrollments have increased by 3.63 million over the decade. This means that decline The data further shows enrollment in government and government aided schools, which account for more than 65% of the school enrollment and the mainstay of the poor and marginalized sections of society, recorded a significantly higher decline by 19 million, 13.8%, and 4.95 million. In these schools too, the decline in enrollment at elementary level has been rather pronounced, 21 million in government school and 3.85 million in government aided schools. So it may not be a coincidence that the country's school-going population in the age group of 6 to 17 years has also declined by 17 million over the past decade. The decline in the group in the age group 6 to 13 is relevant to the enrollment of elementary and secondary levels has dropped by 18 million and 2.17 million. Delving deeper, the data discern a statistically significant strong positive correlation between the school enrollment and estimated population in the relevant age group. The finding is further corroborated by the fact that number of schools in the country has also declined by 79,000 from 1.55 million in 2017-18, 1.47 million in 2013-14, a decline of 5.1%. The burgeoning youth population is necessary for enrollment growth, which India has been experiencing until recently. It has now entered the phase when the population bulge is shifting to the right. Since the process began only recently, it is reflected that rather sharply in elementary level enrollment. The effect will gradually but firmly be felt in the secondary and senior secondary level enrollment and will finally impinge on the higher education. As is already the case in the most developed countries, we will find the phase of transition to shrinking working age population. This is disconcerting because it is happening sooner than expected. Ideally, a country must reap as much demographic dividend as possible to generate a much needed income and wealth to support and sustain the burden of an aging population. Declining school enrollment has less to do with the change in data collection method than the shift in the demographic bulge to the right, unless the 2021 census, this which is yet to begin, present different demographic trend. It could mark the beginning of an end of demographic dividend for India. A burgeoning youth population is necessary for enrollment growth, which India has been experiencing. It has now entered the phase where population bulge is shifting to the right. Since the population process began only recently, it is reflected rather sharply in elementary level enrollment. The effect will gradually but firmly be felt in secondary and senior secondary level enrollment. As is already the case in most developed countries, we will soon face the transition to a shrinking working age population. This is disconcerting because it is happening sooner than expected. Ideally, a country must reap as much demographic dividend as possible and to generate much needed income and wealth to support and sustain the burden of an aging population. The danger of a digital censor board. There is moral panic over a show called India's Got Latent. Much of the furor centers around some crude remarks made by YouTuber Ranveer Elhabadia. His remarks have been condemned. His remarks have been condemned. His on India's Got Talent, which was conceptualized and hosted by the comedian and YouTuber Samay Raina, judges attempt to critique the latent talents of aspiring performers. Dank humor defines the show. Both Allahabadia and Raina enjoy immense popularity as YouTubers, especially with young people. Mr. Raina is a rising sensation who shared the KBC stage with Bachchan, and Allahabadia was extolled by the Prime Minister himself as the creator of the year. While many may say that their online reach is the reason behind the moral panic, the two YouTubers are mere pawns in the great game of the control of our digital media. Notwithstanding the Supreme Court's curt remark sorry, that Mr. Al-Habadia has a very dirty mind. The law separates moral repugnancy from criminality. In Apurva Arora versus Government of NCT, Delhi 24, the court quashed criminal prosecutions for foul language in an OTT show called College Romance. The court demanded an objective test for obscenity, focusing on whether sexual or lustful thoughts were aroused or and not whether words were decent. The courts further explained that coarse language, however distasteful or improper, does not automatically become obscene. Its ruling is directly relevant here. Mr. Alhabadia's comment at worst constitute a risk jest rather than actual obscenity, yet fury and legal intimidation often eclipse constitutional principle. Second legal provision which has been invoked against India's Got Talent is Section 69A of the IT Act 2000. Section 69A of the IT Act 2000, which provides the Indian government with power to block access to a website. As revealed by Kanchan Gupta, a senior advisor, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. Curiously, decency and morality do not fall under the grounds for blocking websites under Section 69A. The statutory limit was exposed as far back as 2010 when the government tried to block the pornographic website Savita Bhabhi. Legality, however, has not stood in the way of union governments' expanding appetite for censorship, as seen in surge of blocking orders, which has been aided by the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Technology Media Ethics Code. Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code Rules 2021. Blocking decisions remain shrouded in secrecy. Courts typically avoid striking them down. The Ministry of Information and Broadcasting push for a sweeping broadcasting bill gathered steam before the general elections and then returned in a form that placed online creators in the same bracket as traditional broadcasters. Earlier, push for a sweeping broadcasting bill gathered steam in general elections and then returned in a form that placed online creators in the same bracket as traditional broadcasters. Earlier, there was a public outcry against the provisions of the bill. Now, thanks to the recent clamor for strong censorship, the bill has received momentum. The Parliamentary Standing Committee of Information Technology, headed by Nishikant Dubey, has now urged the ministry to propose new regulations and amendments. Recent controversy has different actors playing to familiar script, a public uproar leading to new rules which arm the government with sweeping powers. On January 15, 2021, Amazon Prime standard released and was immediately accused of insulting religious sentiments. This led to criminal complaints, government intervention, and an apology from the creators who cut supposedly offensive scenes. Yet multiple FIRs persisted, targeting actors, producers, and Amazon Prime's India head. Amid calls for censorship, the government on February 25, 2021 introduced IT Rules. Part 3 now covers digital news media and OTT platforms, albeit under ambiguous jurisdiction. However, what is interesting is that to escape the clutches of criminal prosecution, OTT platforms have entered into a Faustian bargain. They have now they now invite censorship powers of the ministry to escape, visit to a police station, or read petitions before the different high courts. The price to pay is the discontinuation of any web series which, through its themes or dialogues, pose difficult questions to our society or political leadership. Hence, it should not come as a surprise as popular online creators, including those with India's Got Latent, plead for clemency in coming weeks for pleading for regulation on digital platforms such as YouTube. This present moment in time is not simply an outcome of single controversy, nor is it just an example of rising online vulgarity fueled by cheap data and ubiquitous teleconnectivity. As Yamini Iyer and Nilanjan Sarkar have argued, Indian state has undergone a fundamental change in its political economy, where technology has enabled direct benefit transfers as a form of tribal allegiance rather than right guaranteed by the constitution. Calling it a techno-patrimonialism, they state that it has advocated within a framework of the Prime Minister's political appeal that relies on a mix of cultural nationalism and welfareism populism. Hence, it should come as no surprise that political parties, after competing on DBTs, are now advocating for digital censor boards. This may explain why the entire state and large sections of society has spurred into an action by distasteful joke. Resurrecting brand AP. Government has been making efforts to attract investments. For instance, Centre was instrumental in signing of MOUs for the mega green hydrogen project to be jointly implemented by NTPC, Green Energy and AP Genco near Ankapalli and establishing a BPCL refinery in Ramayanpatnam in Prakasam district. Agricultural protectionism pushes up India's import tariffs. India's import tariffs are 5 times that of US and the highest among BRICS nations. Tariffs levied on imports to India are 5 times higher than what US levies on its imports. The average duty levied was 17% compared to 3% by the US. Also, the average tariff levied by was highest among the BRICS countries. Despite the differences in tariff, the number of products subject to tariffs remain comparable in both countries. India's higher average was mostly due to higher tariffs on agricultural products to protect domestic producers. While tariffs on agricultural goods are really high, it is not so in the manufacturing products. Dhar argues that the reason why India continues to levy high agricultural tariffs is to protect food security and livelihoods. He points that since investment in agriculture is low, just about 6% of the total investment in the country, that sector remains significantly inefficient by global standards. Agricultural tariffs cannot be brought down easily. The US has a very high subsidies on agricultural products. If there are many subsidized US agricultural products floating about in the market, it is very difficult for us to reduce our tariffs. Unless the government decides to pull up the sector by the bootstraps, it will not be able to stand up to international competition. A closer look at the product-wise tariffs shows that agriculture, dairy products, beverages and tobaccos continue to attract more than 30% as import duty. Duty on transport equipment, cotton and textiles came down between 2018 and 2023. Tariffs on electrical machinery, leather, footwear and some manufactured goods increased in the same period. US President Trump recently drew attention towards tariffs levied by various countries. He suggested that the US would impose reciprocal tariffs on countries which he believes have treated the US unfairly, while the finer details and the math of such are not clear yet. His remarks have caused considerable unease in India. Amid the criticism from the US, India recently reduced tariffs on bourbon whiskey from 150% to 100%. India is increasingly exporting more to the US, widening its trade surplus with the US goods exports to the US from India have crossed $53 billion in FY25. Tariffs are being imposed to block imports from the partner countries into the US, but reciprocal tariffs could mean pressure on India to reduce agricultural tariffs. Because at the end of the day, US wants India to import more from them, and what better opportunities to do than to force India to reduce its agricultural tariffs. This is going to be a part of bilateral trade agreement that they will be negotiating. India has maintained that negotiating tariffs on agricultural products such as cereals is off the table for the free trade agreement. But that will not be the case for India US bilateral negotiations. Tariffs are being imposed to block imports from partner countries into the US from partner countries, but reciprocal tariffs could mean pressure on India to reduce agricultural tariffs because at the end of the day US want India to import from them, and what better opportunities to do that than force India to reduce agricultural tariffs. This is going to be a part of bilateral trade agreement that they will be negotiating. India has maintained that negotiating tariffs on agricultural products such as cereals is off the table for free trade agreement, but that will not be the case for India US bilateral negotiations. Supreme Court protects YouTuber from arrest, slams filthy language, derogatory comments on Samaji must be removed. India Qatar elevate ties to a strategic partnership. Is Mr. Chatterjee informed the Indian diaspora is the largest working force in Qatar, and about 6 Indians are in Qatari prisons. About 85 have received pardons during 24. India already has now signed strategic partnership with Kuwait, Oman, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia within the Gulf Cooperation member states. Kuwait, Oman, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Kuwait, Oman, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Kuwait, Oman, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. The officials also confirmed that the situation in the Western Asian region featured in the official talks, saying both sides conveyed their mutual position on the Israel Hamas issues. India conveyed its own position, the Qatari side conveyed their own position. The visit of the Qatari Emir has drawn attention as it is being held just 2 days prior to the five Arab states summit in the Saudi capital Riyadh, which will take up the proposals from the United States following the arrival of the President Donald Trump. Mr. Trump's proposal that the Palestinians of the region should be shifted out to neighboring countries like Egypt and Jordan has drawn attention. India supports two-state solution in bringing the end to Israel-Palestinian crisis and has welcomed the ceasefire that currently India holds that was announced shortly before the swearing-in ceremony of the Trump. Visit of Qatari Emir has drawn attention as it is being just 2 days prior to the five Arab state summit in the Saudi capital Riyadh, which will take up new proposals for United States following the arrival of Trump. Russia US to work on ending Ukraine war, and I have reason to believe that American side has started to better understand our position, which we have once again outlined in detail using specific examples based on President Putin's repeated speeches. Tuesday's meeting was also meant to pave the way for summit between Trump and Putin after the talks wrapped. Mr. Putin's foreign affairs advisor Ushakov told Russia's Channel One that no date has been set yet for the summit, but that it was unlikely to take place next week. Disrespectful to name CEC at midnight, Rahul. How is registering brazen live-in relationships a privacy invasion? Asked High Court. Hearing a plea against mandatory registration of live-in relationships under Uttarakhand's UCC, Uttarakhand High Court has asked how this requirement can be considered an invasion of privacy when couples are brazenly living together without marriage. These oral observations were made by a division bench of the Chief Justice Narinder. Mr. Negi told the court that his client is distressed with the provision in the UCC mandating government registration of couples in such relationships. The petitioners an interfaith couple had claimed that it was difficult for them to live in a society and get their relationship registered. When Mr. Negi pressed for a stay on mandatory registration on live-in relationships, arguing that the state inquiry will institutionalize gossip, Chief Justice Narinder asked whether the state had anywhere asked people not to live together. What gossip? Are you living secretly in some secluded cave? You are living among the civil society, you are brazenly living together without there being a marriage, and then what is the secret? What is the privacy that is invaded? Mr. Negi then told the court about the opposition faced in several interfaith and intercaste couples in India, including the case from Jagdish from Almora, who was killed just because he married an upper caste woman. Government obliged to consider remission of eligible convicts. Supreme Court. Three booked an Al Qaeda module case granted bail. Citing dragging probe in Chapo scam, Supreme Court grants bail to accused. Michael James. IB Ministry issued order to block Vikatan site after cartoon on Modi. Supreme Court to hear petitions against law on CC appointment today. Modi government has tanked India's economy. Kharge. Trump's plan for Gaza is unacceptable and completely inhumane. Abbas Arghachi. Iranian foreign minister says he hopes all countries respect the rights of Palestinian people. India is in consultation with US on sanctions, he adds. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Arghachi, who met with External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar on the sidelines of Indian Ocean Conference here on Sunday, spoke about Chabahar port, Trump's Gaza proposal. Will the US President's decision to resign or review sanctions waiver for Iran, specifically on Chabahar port, impact India-Iran cooperation? And did you discuss this with Mr. Jaishankar during your meeting in Muscat? Yes, we had a lengthy discussion with the minister. Iran attaches great importance to its relations with India. It is very old relationship. The case of Chabahar is not just between Iran and India, this is between Iran and the whole Indian Ocean region. It connects Indian Ocean region to Eurasian region through Iran and then from Eurasia to Europe. And this is a much fast and cheap route using Iranian railroad. This is why India was interested to invest in this port, and we are quite satisfied with the level of cooperation we have on this. We have a 10-year agreement with India, and they had received waivers and were able to proceed on the port without facing any problems from the US. To your question, I would say first of all, we are not sure how much the situation has changed. It is not clear yet. We are still interested to work out with our Indian friends, and it is up to them to work on this question. And we know that India is in close consultation with US on this. When Mr. Trump was last in power, India cut all of its oil imports from Iran due to sanctions threat. Do you discuss the possibility of India resuming its oil intake? It's totally on Indian decision. We have enough customers for our oil. How do you respond to US President's proposal for Gaza? And was this part of your conversation as well? This is something that all countries are speaking to each other about because it is totally unbelievable and totally unacceptable proposal. It is completely inhumane and against the principles of international law to displace a whole people from their own homeland and send them to other places. We know that all the Arab countries and the Islamic countries have a joint position, and we propose to speak in a united voice as an organization of Islamic Cooperation Ministerial Conference that is being convened soon. I have discussed this with everyone I have met, including the Indian Foreign Minister, and we have hoped that all countries respect the rights of Palestinian people for self-determination. Given India's strong ties with the US, PM Modi's recent visit, should India play a role on the issue? That is up to India, right? Of course, Indians have always been very constructive and positive on international developments, and we appreciate any country that plays any role and to help the Palestinian people. Rahul's note an attempt to create controversy. New criminal laws must be implemented in J&K by April Shah. Slight dip in unemployment rate in urban areas. Survey the rate of unemployment for persons of age 15 and above is 6.4. For the period of October to December 24, says periodic labor force survey, Gujarat has the lowest rate at 3%. Himachal topped the list. Himachal has the highest unemployment rate of 10.4%. Gujarat has the lowest 3%. Female unemployment rate was two highest in Himachal at 24%, lowest in 3% in Delhi. PFLFS defines unemployment rate as the percentage of unemployed workers in the labor force in the current weekly status, the number of employed persons either employed or unemployed on an average in a week. The labor force participation rate, the percentage of population in the labor force, was 39.6% for people of all ages, 39.6% in the corresponding quarter last year. LFPR for women has increased by zero point 0.1 percentage points to 20% from last year to 19.9%. However, LFPR has decreased from the last quarter figure of 20.3. The lowest LFPR for all people was in Bihar, and women 30.7 and 9.9. PLFS was done among 1,70,000 people in 45,000 households. Worker population ratio among is 46%, has increased from 46.6 to 47.2%. Worker population ratio of males 15 and above has increased from 69.8% in October to December. The workers are classified into three broad categories according to their status in employment, such as self-employed, regular wage, salaried. Within the category of self-employed, the two subcategories have been made as own account worker and employer combined together. India prepares to submit updated greenhouse gas inventory to UN. Biannual transparency report. Biannual transparency report. Biannual transparency report. Biannual transparency report. Center revamps websites, creates multilingual AI hub for better scheme outreach. Tesla post job openings in India. GDP growth may slow 6.4 to 6.6%. Government is formulating strategies to protect exporters, says Minister of State. India's exports in 23 was $778 billion is 67% more than 23-24. $778 billion. These are challenging times, but Indian exporters have shown resilience. While COVID, climate change, and other conflicts have affected, India is on a strong foundation. Government is now agile, responsive, and make changes in line with change in the global scenario and internal and external challenges. Global Capability Unit for Lufthansa. Insurers can get one-time UPI mandate for life health premium. Ukraine drone attack on Russian pipeline to hit Kazakh oil exports. UN decries summary executions of children by M23 in Democratic Republic of Congo. Turkey detains 282 suspects in operation against insurgents. Argentine judge probes fraud case against Milei for crypto promotion. European leaders differ on sending peacekeepers to post-war Ukraine. Plane turns upside down in Toronto crash, 18 injured. A Delta Airlines jet with 80 people on board crashed on Monday on Toronto's main airport, officials said, turning upside down and leaving at least 18 people injured. Endeavour Air Flight 4819 Endeavour Air Flight 4819 with 76 passengers and 4 crew was landing in the afternoon in Canada's large metropolis, having flown from Minneapolis in US state of Minnesota. No explanation or the cause of the accident or how the plane ended up flipped with its wings has been provided. It is very early on. It's really important that we do not speculate. What we can say is that the runway was dry and there was no crosswind conditions. Earlier, paramedic services had said that three people were critically injured: a child, a man in his 60s, and a woman in her 40s. All of the wounded, including those with minor injuries, were taken to area hospitals either by ambulance or by helicopter. Dramatic images on local broadcast and shared on social media shared people stumbling away from the upside of CRJ 900 plane. At least 200 killed in Sudan RSF assault. Chinese Navy helicopter flies too close to Philippine patrol plate. I'm keen on doing well on elite events too. Gulveer Singh, who hit the headlines last year by breaking the national records in 5,000 meters. A planet on the edge, are Saturn rings older than they look? The solar system is constantly bombarded by dark pieces of fine dust. Astronomers expect this dust to be omnipresent in Saturn's rings, but this is not the case, so they surmise the rings are 100 million years old. This was a simple explanation, but it has a catch. Scientists did not know how the rings could have formed so recently. A debate around the age of Saturn's rings have been raging for a few decades. The new study researchers of Tokyo and Paris have fresh spin to offer that could recast the conversation. Saturn's rings are arresting sight even through modern telescopes. The planet is mostly made of hydrogen and helium, where rings are a billion pieces of mostly bright white, Walter White ice and rock. Some of these pieces are small as grain of salt, others as big as a house. Four spacecraft have visited Saturn thus far, all launched by NASA: Pioneer 2, Voyager 1 and 2, while Cassini orbited Saturn from 2004 to 2017. Cassini visions. Cassini in particular found the rings to be squeaky clean with very little dirt. This is unusual because everything in the solar system, including the Earth, is constantly bombarded by dark pieces of dust, including the finer than the grain of sand. These particles are fragments of the larger chunks of rocks in space. Most of the debris burns on the Earth's atmosphere when they get too close and never reach the surface. Around Saturn, astronomers expect this dark dust to be omnipresent in the rings, but this is not the case. Based on this, scientists hypothesized that Saturn's rings are relatively new, only around 100 million years old. Too young to have accumulated the dust. This was simple explanation which is good, but there's a catch. Scientists do not know how the rings could have formed recently. In the last 100 years, million years, the solar system has been pretty calm. In the very early stages of the formation of our solar system around 4 billion years ago, the system was chaotic and unstable. Therefore, there is a greater chance of a big dynamical event happening that they could form Saturn's rings. Greater size. Greater size distribution is used to constrain the age of solid bodies in the solar system. Boulder, who was not involved in the new study, added, for Saturn's rings, age determination is even more difficult. There are no craters, and the collisional nature of ring particles erases most of its history. Depending on which measurements you choose, it is not too surprising that the people end up with very different age estimates. In my view, the blind man and an elephant is not as a bad metaphor here. In the new analysis, Yodo's computer models showed that when dust particles collided with ice in Saturn's rings, they evaporated and dispersed into hundreds of even smaller flecks, which Cassini has also observed. The models showed that these particles then smash into Saturn itself, beat the planet's gravitational pull, or are dragged into planet's raging atmosphere. In other words, the pearly shine of the Saturn's rings is not thanks to them being young, but because they have a way to eject such foreign bodies that enter into delicate fluid. In sum, there's no reason for the older rings to be darker or vice versa. In fact, the rings could be as old as the solar system according to Hyodo. The basic assumptions in the debate about the age of Saturnian rings centers around water ice composition of the ring particles. Europa, Enceladus, and beyond. Determining whether Saturn got its signature rings isn't just a matter of curiosity. The interest in probing the age of Saturn's ring is beyond the rings themselves. Enceladus, the geologically active moon of Saturn, is a top priority target to study habitability and astrobiology due to active plume activity from its subsurface ocean. The evolution of Saturn rings has fundamental impacts on the evolution of Enceladus and other icy moons of Saturn. In the mid 2000s, Cassini found plumes abundant in water molecules leaking from Enceladus' southern hemisphere. 2014, NASA scientists reported findings evidence of a 10-kilometer thick ocean liquid. In related news, NASA launched the Clipper mission to study Jupiter moons Europa, which is similarly dynamically linked to Jupiter and contains subsurface ocean as well. So, according to researchers, determining Saturn's ring is this difficult. There are no craters, and the collisional nature of ring particles erases most of its history. It is not surprising that people end up with different estimates. Computer models show when dust collides with ice and Saturn rings, they evaporate and are dispersed, so the pearly shine of the rings is not thanks to them being young. There is no reason for older rings to be darker. In fact, they could be as old as the solar system. Determining the age of Saturn's rings is about implications. Uh, Enceladus, Saturn's moon, is top priority target to study habitability due to plume activity. The evolution of the ring has impacts on the evolution. What is an earthquake swarm? An earthquake swarm occurs when multiple seismic events comparable intensity strike small area in a relatively quick succession. NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory, with an image previously released by the James Webb Telescope of the NGC 602 star cluster. NGC 602 star cluster. NGC 602 star cluster. India-Qatar elevate ties to a strategic partnership. Qatar, a major energy supplier to India, on Tuesday signed an agreement to elevate India-Qatar relationships to a level of strategic partnership. Ministry of External Affairs announced the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and visiting Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani discussed multiple issues, including the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict in the Gaza Strip. Strategic partnership elevates the present state of bilateral relationships to a strategic level. We are looking deeper cooperation in the field of trade, investment, energy, security, as well as regional and international fora. Trade, investment, energy, security. Trade, investment, energy, security. Regional and international fora. Trade, investment, energy, security. Trade, investment, energy, security. Trade, investment, energy, security. Trade, investment, energy security. Trade, investment, energy security. Trade, investment, energy security. India and the GCC are negotiating about having an FTA. Both India and Qatar are exploring the signing of an FTA in the future, says Mr. Chatterjee. India is considering going ahead with a bilateral FTA with Qatar as discussion for India GCC FTA continues. Indian side also said that the strategic partnership would have a security component, though a clear timeline for such process was not articulated. A total of 38 Qatari entities representing retail, finance and energy sector participated in the deliberations when two sides resolved to double bilateral trade to $28 billion. The visit also presented challenge for both sides as Purnendu Tiwari, an Indian ex-Navy commander, remains in Qatari custody. Purnendu Tiwari. Odisha government's order probe into the death of Nepali girl, eviction of students. US Russia to work to end the war on Ukraine. Should this conflict come to an acceptable end, the incredible opportunities that exist to partner with Russia geopolitically on issues of common interest and frankly economically on issues that hopefully would be good for the world and also improve our relations in the long term. Bengal CM dismisses opposition allegations of minority appeasement. So that's all for today. See you in the next one.